Whenever somebody asks me what my favorite video game of all time is, I'm always like, it's The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask for the Nintendo 64. And they just don't seem to get it, and I can't seem to explain to them why I like it so much every time I say it. Majora's Mask is so different from every other Zelda game, but it's still my favorite Zelda game, which is funny because I identify the Zelda franchise for everything that Majora's Mask isn't. Setting aside the similarities of gameplay, when I think of The Legend of Zelda, I think of the Triforce and the Master Sword and Zelda. And my favorite Zelda game doesn't have any of that. And I guess I just like it for different reasons. The reason I like Majora's Mask so much is because it seems to have been created as a work of art, and when I play it, I feel like I'm walking through a painting. Google has the definition of a work of art as the expression or application of human creative skill and imagination. And that's exactly what this game is. It tells a story in a way that no other Zelda game does, and it's very unique because of it. The characters and the buildings and the dungeons and the masks are all part of this simulation that you find yourself in, and it's up to you to play through it the best you can. Now, I don't want to try to convince you that Majora's Mask is the best Zelda game, let alone the best game ever, because it's not. I don't think this game is perfect, and nobody can convince me that it is. It's actually a pretty flawed Zelda game, like it's so messed up, but that's also why I love it so much. Everything is so unintentionally intentional and is no doubt my favorite game out there. And I'll try my best to explain why. I want to start out by saying this did not used to be my favorite Zelda game. When I first played this game, I was a child, and I got this immediately after finishing Ocarina of Time. It was like the third Zelda game I played, the first one I finished, and I was ready to switch things up. And Majora's Mask was not what I expected, but I didn't not like it. It was very different in a really cool way. It felt like there was a lot more to do, so many more people to interact with, so many more places to explore, and this was just Clocktown that I was basing all of this off of. It was way more immersive. I had a lot more fun doing the side quests and playing the mini games than I did in Ocarina of Time. Everything about it was really interactive. I felt like I was part of a little community. I really liked the concept of collecting masks too. It wasn't only fun, but it actually meant something. Like when I collected a mask, it benefited me and gave me advantages. I could get a new skill or help other people with them. It wasn't just a token, which is something that the game could have done but didn't, and I did really like that. And the really cool ones transformed me into a whole different person, and I could use this person to complete dungeons designed for the skills I now had. There were only 4 dungeons, but because of it, they were all very well thought through, so I had a lot of fun playing through them. It made me feel really smart when I figured out something, and they could get very frustrating, but they were still fun and especially rewarding. I liked the different instruments I could play, and I liked exploring the ocean, and I liked collecting the fairies in the temples, and I liked riding Epona, and it was just, in one word, fun. I had a lot of fun playing it. So, after 3 years, because I was and still am terrible at video games, I finished it. I really liked it, but Ocarina of Time was still better, and I liked Skyward Sword a lot too. They were just the Zelda games in my opinion, and there wasn't anything really special about this game. And I didn't play it again for a while, because pretty much everything on my Nintendo 64 was broken, and I had it on my DS, but it just wasn't the same. So it took me a while to get back into it. I had to pester my mom into getting new cords for the old console, and when it did start working, I just played Ocarina of Time for a while and like Mario Kart. So it was only a few years ago that I picked it up and played it again. And oh my god, this game was so much crazier than I thought it was. The way I see it, the meaning behind Majora's Mask is hiding behind a mask itself. My first playthrough was when I didn't see what was behind the mask, for a few reasons. A big factor that can stop you from realizing how weird this game is the very obvious thing that everyone looks the same as they did in Ocarina of Time, and it's actually really bizarre that they do. It's not just certain characters either. The main characters are also similar, like the Happy Mask Salesman and even the Skull Kid. When I played it as a kid, it just made sense, like it was probably just lazy development, or it was just how things are. But why is it that way? If everything didn't look the same as Ocarina of Time, you would feel like you were being let in on a lot more. Something I noticed while playing this years later is that the game is actually really eerie. If you look past the things like the character's resemblance to Ocarina of Time and the somewhat happy vibe the game is showing you to start with, you can actually start to look at this game from a whole new perspective. All of the colors in Clocktown are tinted and neon, and the postage system is weird, and the characters' personalities are switched. The story behind the Skull Kid is pretty sad, and the Happy Mask Salesman is pretty terrifying. It's all very eerie. It's almost like it's part of Link's imagination. I didn't really notice any of this when I played the game at first, and the fun playthrough I got initially turned into an actual experience the second time around. Something you realize while playing this is that the entire story is actually based very heavily on the idea of emotion. The way the characters interact with each other and the way they cope with the moon falling. You get to see them actually evolve in the 3-day cycle. They get more and more scared and hopeless, and especially that first time you play when the moon just falls and you can't do anything about it. And that's actually one of the things that makes this game so unique. Compared to the other games that pretty much worship the ground he walks on, Link is literally just getting dragged down for the entire duration of the story. You're turned into a Deku scrub as soon as you start the game. That's a new low for the guy. This task he's set on should be impossible for your average hero. The moon is falling from the sky. You have 3 days and you have to do all this stuff. The only reason you're able to complete things is because you have the power to manipulate time. And I mean, that's why the hero of time is the person who can stop this and nobody else can. And that makes me happy. Link is capable of doing a lot. But so are you, the player, because nobody tells you what to do. It just says, here's your objective, go. And the objective is get the Majora's Mask, stop the moon. But the interesting thing is, trying to stop the moon isn't actually what the game's about, because that's not what the story's about. The point of this game isn't about where you're trying to go or what you're trying to do. It's about the people you help while you're doing it. It's the whole friends you make along the way thing. Like, every single character has a personality and you get to help everyone. The time cycle is what creates such a real environment, because every second in the game is a second where something happens. There's the objective and then there's the stories in the moment. There's no structure of story. Whatever you're actively seeing is part of the story and you can't really progress through it. It's just what's happening. And you can try your best to put the pieces together to figure out what's going on. And that's part of what makes this story so powerful. It's the moments of not knowing what the hell is going on. It's when you first look up at the moon and when it crashes and when you realize you can't save everyone. This simulation feels a lot like a real work of art. Like, it's a painting and I'm staring at this painting trying to figure out the overall idea of what it's supposed to be. And every time I play it, I rethink it. It gives you the puzzle pieces and you can decide how you want to put them together. And I don't think anybody should try to give this game a certain meaning, because it is what it is. What you see is what the game is. There's nothing else beyond that. So it's up to you to figure out what you want it to be. And this also goes for gameplay, which is a huge reason why so many people dislike this game, because, well, it doesn't tell you anything about the story. It also doesn't tell you how to do anything. And I mean, I say suck it up, because the game wouldn't be the same if it did, and the gameplay is still really well put together. But I mean, I do get where they're coming from.
I had pretty much two advantages when I played this game for the first time.
One, I had already played Ocarina of Time, so I knew what I was doing more or less, because as far as the gameplay goes, Majora's Mask expects you to have already played Ocarina of Time. It expects you to know what you were doing. And two, which is something a lot of people didn't have, I made a point to play every single side quest as I progressed through the game. If you haven't done both or even just one of these things, you're gonna have a much more difficult time playing.
And this is part of what can make the game so confusing.
It expects you to do everything, but it doesn't tell you how to do any of it. It keeps telling you, just keep playing through the dungeons, and if you listen to what it says, it tends to punish you for doing it because you never played the side quest. And it is possible to finish the game without doing even one side quest, but it is extremely hard. I realized this on my second playthrough, actually. In the Gerudo Fortress, since you only have one empty bottle from the swamp, you have to go back and forth over and over to collect the eggs, which is just bad gameplay. It's not fun. You can't convince me otherwise. And being on the moon, which is actually one of my favorite concepts about the game, is only really there for the people who did do the side quests, which is also really confusing. You get the Fierce Deity's mask if you do all the side quests, which is fine. It's your reward for helping the people in the world, and it can be seen as showing your maturity and development as a person, which I think is really cool and one of the most unique aspects about the game. But they could have conveyed this so much better throughout the game without making it seem like you were doing the right thing by doing what the game told you to do.
So none of what I'm talking about actually bothers me, but I do understand why people don't get this game. If you're playing it more for the sake of playing it, you'll probably not appreciate it all that much. The game can arguably be very confusing in a lot of different ways.
So when people say it's the perfect Zelda game, I don't really get it, because it's not a perfect game. But it's not supposed to be the perfect Zelda game. That's not what the point of the game is. I think the way people understand this game affects the way they play it. If you want to do all the side quests and help the people in and around the town, it's your decision. And if you don't, that's also your decision. It takes a certain kind of person. It's an acquired taste. It doesn't mean it's a perfect game. It means you can appreciate it for different reasons. The same way that I can't seem to bring myself to appreciate Tears of the Kingdom all that much. I just don't see it and appreciate it the same way a lot of other people do. And everyone sees games differently, the way everyone sees art differently. So this game is not perfect, I said it again, but that doesn't mean it's bad, and that doesn't mean it's not 100,000,000% my favorite game out there, which I realize is kind of ridiculous because it's an old game with weird graphics and slow dialogue, but it doesn't matter. I love it for what it is, and that's really everything I have to say.
Click somewhere on the screen to watch a video where I talk about how Skyward Sword is better than you think it is.